Hi, Eric. Hi,
Oh,
Ty.
someone from, did I see? Yes.
Do you see someone you know? Hi, Matthias.
I just saw somebody, I think, did I see someone from the Irish Rugby Football Union who must be on a very big high?
Oh yeah, could well be. Hi, Sinead. More people coming in. Hope everybody's having a nice Tuesday today. We're here for our roundtable on creative thinking. I'm just going to admit more people. My name is Shay Butler. I probably have met some of you before on some previous roundtables or tasters that we've run, but I am program manager at Tangent. Very quickly to tell you who Tangent is Trinity's ideas workspace. Essentially, we're an innovation hub on campus in Trinity, and we specialize in support and training in the areas of creativity and innovation. And in this session, we're talking about creativity and creative thinking specifically. And what we'll be doing is discussing with the panel a little bit the importance of creative thinking, the what, the why, and the how, as a view to stimulate, innovation and good ideas individually and in our workplaces. The discussion here is linked to a program that we're running on design thinking, and it's like sneakily a little promo event for that program. At the end of this session, I will be giving you more information on that program, which is starting in May. But for the time being, I will kick off with this session. In terms of housekeeping, a couple of things to call out. We are live streaming this session on social, but don't fear, we won't be using your images on any marketing materials or anything like that afterwards. But if you'd prefer potentially not to have your video thumbnail show up on live screen, you could turn off your video now. In terms of interaction, we'd love to get questions. You can do that in a couple of ways. You can pop a question into chat on Zoom here. And just to prove to me that some of you know where chat is, I'd love for you to pop in an answer to a question in chat now. How creative are you feeling right now? 0, go away, stop talking to me, or 10, somewhere Salvador Dali, Pablo Picasso. Just pop in your number. Magella's a 6, Mateus is an 8. They're good scores. Panel members can put in their votes on this as well. 8, 5. Thanks, Sarah, for being honest with the 1. Eric's got a 6.981, which is lovely. We've 6s, 5, 8s. Okay, brilliant. So you all know where chat is. That's great. You can use chat at any stage during the panel discussion and pop in a question. I'll do my best to represent that to the panel. If I don't get to it, there's a chance at the end of the session to ask a question as well. So we have that there. One other little bit of work. Alan, I'm really sad you're on 0 creative index right now. We will try to increase that by the end of the session, so let us know how we go. One other piece of information we're going to ask for you, and if I was to do this in an in-person live room, I'd probably ask people to put their hands up, but I'm going to launch a poll, and this is in general. How creative do you think you are generally? I am 100% mega creative, sometimes, rarely, never, so feel free to pop your answer into the poll, and we'll see how we're doing. Do we think we are creative? Results coming in, about 60% completed so far. I'll give it another second. There's a few more to vote. We have some people 100% mega, which is great. I wasn't sure if we'd get anyone. Okay, I think that's nearly everybody. I'll just give it a couple of more seconds. There we go. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So I think you should be able to see this. So we've got 50% bang in the middle, which I think is quite good. A couple of outliers on the never and a couple of on the 100% mega. So I think we have a nice range. Again, hopefully by the end of this session, we will be able to elevate how creative you think you are or can be. So
I'll bring you for a walk later if I go smart.
I think someone's just off mute, but I will sort that now. All good. So what are we going to do next? I'm going to introduce the panel. So in no particular order, I'm going to start with John Sinden first. So John Sinden is an experienced designer for Bank of Ireland. John, how are you doing today?
Great, thank you. And I'm delighted to be on panel. So yeah, look forward to this topic of creative thinking.
Where are you today on creativity, 0 to 10, John?
Do you know what? I've just come off doing a load of customer journey mapping, so yeah, fairly high, I would say. So good 8. Solid
Nice. Okay, we might chat to you about the customer journey mapping in the how later. That would be interesting, I think. Nice to have you, John. Thanks for being here. Next up, we have Niamh O'Hara. Niamh is a UX and experience design thinker lecturer in TU Dublin. Niamh, how are you today?
Oh, good. Thank you, Shay. Feeling so creative. I mean, I get to work with lots of people, so that always helps. I think that's really helpful when it comes to creative thinking. Yeah, so feeling good today.
Great. Okay, brilliant. Okay, last but not least, we have Jonathan Bannister. So Jonathan Bannister is a learning partner with Tangent, and indeed, Jonathan is the facilitator who would run the design thinking program that this is a sneaky promo for. Jonathan, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
And on your 0 to 10, where are you at the moment?
I started low and then cycled around Regent's Park for 90 minutes, which is one of the ways I get in the zone. So I'm sort of zipping. Nothing like a bit of bicycling. Shay and I share a love of cycling. So anybody else, we're planning to run a creative problem solving course on bicycle later on in the year.
Yeah, you've heard it here first, Jonathan. Just so you know, it is a little bit jumpy. So if it gets worse, I'll let you know, and maybe killing your video might be needed. So that's the panel, everyone. Now we're going to go through into the panel discussion. So the title of this roundtable, I'm just going to pop it into chat so everyone can see it, is Creative Thinking: What, Why, and How. And what we're going to do is tackle each of those questions in order. We're not going to start with the why. So for Simon Sinek fans, we're going to do that second. We're going to start with the what. And Jonathan Bannister, I think I'm going to start with you on the what. And the question that we're going to answer in terms of what here, we're going to start with the basics. And the question is, what does creativity mean to you? Before I hear your thoughts on that, Jonathan, though, I'm just going to pop in what my kind of new best friend, ChatGPT, says when you ask that question to it, and I'll pop it into chat as well. So when you ask ChatGPT, what does creativity mean to you? It says, as an AI language model, I don't have personal feelings or experiences like humans do, but I can give you a general definition of creativity. So creativity is the ability to generate original and innovative ideas and solutions. So there we go. That's what our AI chatbot thinks. Jonathan, thoughts?
Yeah, and I quite like chat. So I quite like chat too. Spend quite a lot of time chatting to chat. Do you know, very simply, I think creativity is a way you decide to approach the world. Yeah. Is that me, or is
no,
that?
No, I got
have
it.
You got that? So thank you. And I think there's lots of quotes on creativity out there. And the one I always go to is Dr. Ruth Noller, who was an American mathematician. And she came up with an equation for creativity back in the 50s. And it was interesting because she started her career in US naval intelligence, only one of the first women to be allowed to join US naval intelligence. And for those of you who have any knowledge of the Second World War, US naval intelligence had a major failure in intelligence gathering, which actually brought the Americans into the Second World War when they missed the whole of the Japanese fleet sailing towards Pearl Harbor. And she became really interested in how people approach creativity. And her equation was that creativity, capital C, is the function of small a, capital K, and you might still, have you stopped that? Thank you for Shay for doing that in the chat. I and E. And she said K is your knowledge. And it's not just your sector specific knowledge. So just because John's on my screen, it's not just how brilliant John is at the customer journey or the UX design. It's also the breadth of your knowledge. And she said people who had really specific skills, but a breadth of skills, they would have the constant K would be higher. I was your imagination, the ability to generate new ideas, visualize possibilities. But as we all know, we can't spend our life in divergent thinking because we just end up with a wall of post-it notes. At some stage, we've got to be able to evaluate those ideas. And that is the ability to assess those ideas, analyze them, maybe merge some together. So she said, key components of KIE. And then she also stuck in small a, and that's your attitude. And you are one of those people that sucks the energy out of every encounter, or are you one of those people that actually people want to be part of? They want to be in a room with you because you help sort of bounce ideas around. And for those of you, and I love the fact that one person actually said they're never creative, because if you're a mathematician, the only way you can get to 0 for C is if one of those integers is 0, which means you either have, you're such a black hole in terms of your attitude. You walk into a room and you just suck the energy out of the room and everybody freezes. You have no knowledge at all. Yeah. You've never had an idea and you've never been able to evaluate an idea. Even something as simple as is about making a choice. So isn't that just extraordinarily powerful? Everybody, if you follow Ruth Nola's equation, everybody is creative. It actually, by the way, and that's another bit that we'll go into, of course, it does mean you start to benchmark it. And by goodness, you can go away and you can work on your attitude. You can work on your knowledge. You can work on your imagination skills. And you can work on your evaluation skills. We're all creative. Did that answer the question, Shay?
I think so. Yeah, thanks. And just so you know, your line is a little bit funky, but we got all of it. We're not catching up with the video, but we got all of that. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Jonathan. It does. Niamh or John, any bills on that? Thoughts on the formula that Jonathan's come up with, or any other thoughts on what creativity means to you?
That's the first time I'd seen that formula. That is so cool. And like it kind of builds upon David Kelly's book, Creative Confidence, and he sets the scene in terms of creativity again, kind of advocating that we're all innately creative. It's maybe a little bit like the equation. It's very difficult not to be creative, but he kind of observed over his career, he's the founder of IDEO and the author of Creative Confidence. He observed over his career that, you know, from his perspective, creativity is generally kind of bred out of people. You know, he gives examples in school, creativity being linked to things like drawing and then getting a little piece of feedback saying, oh, that doesn't look like a horse. And you're like, oh my God, I'm not going to do that again. And just these small interactions that maybe instill a sense of fear in people. And he feels that everyone, again, is innately creative. And, you know, in companies, sometimes the realm of creativity is like the creative types, but he says, no, people are naturally creative. And it's been discouraged, and really driving that is a fear of judgment and a fear of failure. And in organizations, you know, that fear of judgment could be like actually C-suite executives who are fearful of looking silly in front of like their teams, or then, you know, team members who are fearful of saying the wrong thing in front of their peers and their managers. And he reckons that this a kind of a structured approach to creative thinking can help people and build their confidence and give them the tools and the skills and that confidence to apply creative thinking in their lives and then in their workplace as well. So everyone is innately creative, is maybe linking in with Jonathan's point there as well.
Nice, thanks, Niamh. I think I got the book name right for David Kelly. Creative Confidence, was that it? I put it into chat.
Creative Confidence, yeah.
Confidence.
Okay.
He kind of argues that design thinking. You know, a structured process to encourage creative thinking, ideation, problem solving, decision making, evaluating. Using that mindset, we can cultivate creative thinking, facilitate it, and everyone can build their own confidence, their creative confidence, and their confidence in innovation and their ability to innovate and solve problems. So sorry, that's the what the book outlines, and I would actually really recommend it. It gives practical kind of examples then as well of how to apply it.
Great, brilliant. Okay, so creative confidence. Okay, thanks a million for that, Niamh. Can't quite see that, Jonathan. I don't know what it is.
It's
a horse. It looks
wanted a
totally
horse.
like a horse. I think it's amazing.
Okay, there's I don't get the link, but all good. Oh, Matthias has put something into chat. Creativity to me means to come up with new idea that challenges what's already established amongst the majority of the population, to shape new solutions and solve existing problems. Yeah, thanks for that, Matthias. Sounds good. John Sinden, we've kind of moved on from like what is creativity to almost into a little bit of what is creative thinking. Before I go to you, I'm just going to pop into chat what ChatGPT said creative thinking was, and it mentions, you know, a process, I suppose. And Niamh mentioned there, you know, fear of judgment and maybe looking silly. So, like, thoughts on what is creativity to you, Jonathan, and maybe how to overcome that whole judgment area.
Yeah, there's coming from an organization currently, financial services, which is inherently set perhaps in its way of thinking. What we've had to use is many of the methodologies, and there's been many programs of late to actually basically get people to trust the process of creativity, and it's not necessarily getting out there and making something. And as Niamh alluded to, is often in the domain of the designer where creativity sat, but actually the creativity is not creativity in producing something, it's actually the thought process of how to go about coming up with a solution, rather than bringing the solution in mind to a meeting, an agenda, whatever it is. And that's almost a cultural setup. So some companies have this in spades, they inherently do this. Other companies inherently don't believe they are creative, so therefore they have to come with a solution, because that's the only way you can get something done. And I think that we're debunking that a great deal. I mean, I've worked in betting companies and industries where actually it's inherent, like we're going to come up with a new idea and we're going to actually get it out into the domain within 24 hours. And that was just what people think. So it was very much as we really cognizant of the culture in which you sit, and actually how the methodologies will need to adapt and take time with it. You don't always get there in the first instance, but you can start to build towards it. And there's a transformative quality to creativity as something you're trying to do, and bringing people on that journey. So that's something to say, is that if it doesn't happen immediately, it's fine. It's trust the process.
Great. Okay, thanks. And we'll get a little bit into the how later in terms of how to be creative. But I guess, Jonathan, the point there was, you know, we all have our own ideas of how creative we are, but then there's also the idea at the organizational level of how creative they feel or maybe have been, and that's something to be aware of as well.
Yeah,
Great.
and I think the question, can you hear me? I don't know if that's coming through. I mean, for me, both what John and Niamh said about both processes, that, you know, one of the questions I would ask you, all the people here who are watching, is your organization a place where you're allowed to offer an idea, even if that idea is slightly fuzzy and unformed? Or is your organization a place, as soon as somebody offers an idea like that, you bat it out of the park, because that's not what we do here? And I think the culture is so crucial to making places safe. And when you're doing this thinking, I would argue when you're doing divergent thinking, you never, ever, ever do convergent thinking. Yeah? You have to separate those, and people have to know which side they're in. And that is the only way, and again, please push back if you don't agree with me, but it is the only way, I would argue, you can make a place utterly safe for ideas, is that people know, am I doing this? Are we doing this? Or are we evaluating? So if you think about it in the Nola equation, are we in the I stage or the E stage?
Yeah, so divergent is lines with the imagination of the I stage, and convergent, I'm just trying to pop this into chat as I go, aligns with the evaluation. A couple of other comments that came in on chat. Thank you, Becca, for giving your definition on creativity. It's your grandma's trumpet you found in the attic and don't know how to play, and sometimes you just gotta go for it at 3 in the morning, even if your neighbors don't like it. I like that. That's great. And a nice example from Mary in terms of what Google do. Friday is creativity day where people create and work on their own projects. So we might move on to the second question, which was the why. And Niamh, might start with you on this one. So we now kind of have an idea of what creativity is and what creative thinking is even. But like, you know, we're starting with the basics as well. Why should we do it?
I think that it benefits kind of individuals, teams, and organizations in different ways. So leading on from that kind of confidence building, if you individually are engaged in that mindset where you're applying a creative thinking, it is about maybe building your own confidence. It's helping you find your voice maybe in a work context and a professional context, but it also maybe breaks down a little bit of fear in terms of putting yourself out there and taking risks. And that might be one kind of aspect of a creative way of thinking, is that ability to kind of put yourself out there a little bit and take a little bit of risk, and sometimes even maybe breaking the rules a little bit within the confines of the task at hand. But for organizations, super important in terms of its transformation of how products and services are designed and developed and deployed. My own background is in digital product, financial services as well. And when you apply creative thinking methods in a team, in an organization, maybe a little bit to John's point, it transforms a culture that is focused on maybe shipping products, on getting stuff out there, on measuring success in terms of how much stuff you're doing. And it reframes the conversation into, okay, what problems can we solve for our customers? Who are our customers? What do we know about them? How are they currently using our products or services? How can we understand more about them? How can we understand more about the jobs that they're doing with our products and services? And that kind of, I suppose, is a cornerstone of creative thinking and design thinking. It's about human-centered and putting people at the heart of the creative thinking process. Other reasons why organizations would engage in this kind of mindset or way of working, it gets to solving the right problems, and ultimately that leads to kind of product success and the success of services. It is innovative, so this kind of flexible way of working that's focused on problem solving, it cultivates and fosters innovation. It's collaborative, so it breaks down silos in organizations. You get people together, everyone has a voice. It facilitates decision making and better decision making. It helps generate lots and lots of ideas. It creates a culture where there's no such thing as stupid ideas. Everyone gets to contribute, everyone has a voice. And there are techniques then used to maybe measure the merit of ideas and how much value they can bring based on a problem that you're solving. And then crucial to kind of creative thinking is maybe evaluating those ideas. So figuring out ways where you can test a hypothesis about your idea and bring a little bit of data to your conversations and your decision making, and maybe see your idea in action and whether it actually solves a problem that you've identified from the whole kind of process. So, you know, ultimately for organizations, it's about a better way of working. So it's transformative in terms of the culture, the corporate culture. And then it's about designing better products and services and solving problems for people and customers. So a better outcome for organizations, and then so many benefits for individuals as well about building their creative confidence again.
Brilliant. Sounds great. So at the individual level, we get benefit; at the team level, the org level, at the corporate culture level, and then of course the end customers get the benefit as well. But you mentioned one thing you mentioned, Niamh, you said solve the right problems. Do you mind just going into that a little bit more? What do you mean by solving the right problems?
Well, I've worked in lots of companies where maybe, again, sorry, my own kind of lens is kind of digital products. Maybe kind of some of the features and the products that might ship or get developed, they might be kind of driven by sales calls or yeah, pretty much sales. So a sales team might identify through conversations with one client or maybe two big clients, things that they'd like to see in the products. And that's one way where it's a kind of a shipping culture where you're just responding to these kind of sales requests. And maybe the features that you're developing are not actually beneficial to the majority of your core customers, and that kind of affects the product integrity then as well. So generally kind of products do something really, really well for a core cohort of customers. And rather than kind of respond in an ad hoc way and bolt on lots of features in response to maybe sales requests or maybe requests from, you know, a CEO, or you might actually look at what problems your product can or is solving for customers, and figuring out ways to improve that from the customer's lens, and they are the right problems to solve for, maybe, you know, as opposed to responding to I suppose kind of stakeholders within your organization and what they think that products and services should do. And that's the human-centered kind of right problems to solve for. How can we help people who are interacting with the products and services that we're putting out there?
Brilliant. Thanks, Niamh. And you mentioned design thinking. So design thinking all about empathizing with your customer first to try to get that insight. To figure out what the real problems are. Johnson, then any builds on that, on the why we should be creative and creative thinking?
As Niamh mentioned, the human-centered piece. So a lot of creative thinking, design thinking in the last generation perhaps of this activity has been very much into the consumer space, right? How companies innovate into producing better consumer-facing products. But there is a shift now, and I think what we're starting to see now is the organizations within themselves starting to do it. So the HR departments are realizing that you can't keep doing the same thing in the same way, right? The IT teams, the teams who are not necessarily facing into consumer, they're also their internal customers, the employees, all of this enterprise level thinking. And I think when you start to see organizations shift towards that and start to go, actually, there is a different way to do things because we're standing still, or whatever it might be, that shift has happened, and that's starting to accelerate. Because if I'll be really honest, in the consumer space, which I've been working in Niamh perhaps similarly, like it's fairly saturated with a lot of this, and like there is the same that we've come up with a lot of ideas. We'll keep, I'm sure, on fringes finding new ways of doing things, but the real opportunity, I think, is actually within organizations and starting to mushroom themselves out of their own current thinking, and that becomes very real for people, right? For people who are perhaps not necessarily in frontline, who are actually doing some back office activities, who are deep knowledge centers of processes and activities. How do you unlock that potential within people? And I think there's a lot of untapped resource, because that also will apply, same thought process can apply to the consumer essentially. So I think that's where you starting to see it, but actually it's that the ice is very much stored in that space.
Great. Yeah, interesting to consider, who are our customers, or maybe our end users, the external, but also the internal, and how we can have human-centered design practices for those. Before we move on to the last topic, Jonathan Bannister, any builds on anything that Niamh or John has said so far on that one?
Well, I love that idea that John just said about unlocking individuals' potential, and I think this understanding of the cognitive, we are better. I am not saying we're good. We're better at seeing gender diversity. We're better at noticing ethnic diversity. But the one thing that we are still really poor at understanding is the cognitive diversity in the way people think and like to approach problem solving. Ultimately, that's all we are. Yeah, human beings are a problem solving. We're here to have, and then there's a whole lot of other stuff that we've built around that. And unless we have that understanding of how some people's energy might go up in the divergent thinking phase, and some people's energy might go up in the convergent thinking phase. And sometimes, I'm sure you've been in a meeting where you've gone, why does Niamh always just throw out idea after idea after idea? And you're sitting there getting it, and you're going, we just need a plan to get stuff done. Yeah, that's cognitive diversity in action, but with us appreciating our cognitive diversity. And I think that's one thing I would really urge you in your organizations. What are you doing to help all of your team members appreciate and understand how people, and the two things you need to learn is how people like to gain information and how they like to use information. And some of us prefer to gain information experientially, which I am. And some of us like to read the manual, watch 6 YouTube films of how to put the piece of furniture together. I just find the hex key and start screwing things together. And some of us, our energies up when we're doing the divergent thinking, the convergent thinking. And unless you see that, I would argue, to John's point about unlocking individuals' potential, of course you can start, but you can't do a perfect job until you have that sort of understanding.
Okay, nice. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for giving that angle on cognitive diversity and creative preferences. We're going to move on to the where are we? We're on the how now, so we're on the third and last. There is comments coming into chat. I haven't kept up with them. I will scan them in a sec later, and if there's any questions there, we'll pick them up at the end. But we're moving on to the how now, so we'll start with John Sinden on this one. So we know what creativity is, creative thinking, why we should do it, but how can we start? How can we be deliberate in our creative thinking? So John, from personal experiences of Bank of Ireland or maybe beyond, any thoughts on that?
So I think there is the methodologies used need to be pretty well structured, right? And you can get a lot of people into the room and you can get a lot of conversations happening, but unless there is the structure there, and we've all been in those meetings where actually there is a lack of agenda, lack of structure. But there's also a great deal of faith that you're asking people to step across the unseen bridge into a world where actually, if they haven't been doing this before, you're asking them to take a step into something which is actually new to them. So you're going to have to make sure you bring people along on the journey. And those times that's happened, when you bring people along the journey and it's the outcome in mind, and you're giving a really good intent as to what we're trying to solve here. So don't try and boil the ocean. Don't try and do too much. And as well as give a really clear set of boundaries. And I think, like, if you were just to say that everyone, please go and be creative, right? It's too wide and a notion for even people to comprehend. But as soon as you say, okay, let's come up with this, we need to come up with a new way of doing this particular thing, and we've already set the boundaries, we've already set the parameters as to what it is going to be. like give people the freedom to actually operate within that space and to bounce ideas, and when you bring a lot of knowledge into that. So there is a lot of faith and trust in the process, which has been kind of, we've nutted out this one, this design thinking processes, whether it's in workshops and facilitations and all these different ways of getting to answers at different steps along the way. And I think you're asking people to come along on that journey, right? And there is many ways, as Jonathan and Eve will probably testify to, there is lots of ways you can get people along there, but you do need to structure it accordingly. And when we start to look at like a very simple thing around what we're trying to do within a legacy organization such as the Bank of Ireland, where you need to have the structure, we're regulated, there is a license which needs to be maintained. You can't go off and expect to do things just because you've got an idea. You need to actually ground it and actually anchor it to some sort of method and process and structure and a way of doing things, because it builds confidence. And then once you start to build on that confidence, then do people start to, I guess, come on the journey even quicker with you and actually and more articulately. So I think start with the structure, start with the process, understand what design thinking is and what it isn't, and understand all the different methods, and just try one process, right? You don't need to be conversant in everything. Try one, really refine it and get better at it, and then keep evolving that practice.
Great, thanks. And in Bank of Ireland, you've mentioned design thinking a fair bit. So would you say design thinking would be the kind of the top process you'd use currently, or?
It's, do you know what? I think it's become service design, because we deal with a lot of physical and digital products and services. So dare I say, design thinking kind of kick-started a lot of the discussion around it over the last number of years, and where we've taken it now is that organization has matured. And every organization will have a certain steps within their maturity. Some might be way off. All right, if we're not aware Airbnb, where actually the CEO was a designer in his first place. Other like the maturity is a big part of it. So we've actually evolved it to be perhaps using service design methods and practices. And over the last few years, we've worked with people, and they've kind of gone into different roles. They've gone into different areas. They've started to go, actually, we want this. We don't really understand it, but we're going to bring you in. That's the next level of maturity. And then when they're starting to do it themselves and looking for more expertise, then it's the next step of maturity. And then you're dealing with lots of different divisions and organized parts of the organization which have not yet done it. So like it is an evolution, right? And you don't necessarily jump from point 1 to point 10. You need to go through all the different steps in order to be able to get there. And not everyone comes
I think we might have
as well. Sometimes it feels nice that
no, I think we got you again. It just stalled for a sec.
Okay, listen, I'll hand over to someone else just in case.
Just in case, yeah. Okay, thanks a million, John. Appreciate it. Niamh, like I suppose, from the educational point of view, then, in terms of how to be deliberate in our creativity, you know, as a lecturer in TU Dublin, and like any thoughts on how that manifests itself for you?
Well, I think in education, we're I can only, sorry, just from maybe the department and team that I work in, we're much more cognizant of core skills that can be transferred across sectors. So these kind of core skills include creativity, innovation. You know, you started off referencing ChatGPT, generative AI. These are the type of skills that will keep us in jobs and compete with automation and generative AI. So even though I work on quite a technical course, you know, creative digital media, we are, I think, pivoting a lot more closely to these key skills: creativity and innovation and teamwork, analytical thinking, critical analysis. They're all linked. And even in terms of how we maybe structure classes, how we are changing the way maybe traditional kind of lecture labs. I don't know if people might have different experiences of third level, but more to kind of studio-based and collaborative work where these kind of core skills are fostered. I think it really varies though, from, you know, John was talking about the level of kind of cultural maturity in organizations. Really does kind of depend on where your organization is at. You know, that's kind of one side of it, the teaching. We're all kind of more focused on the core skills, but also then I work in the public service. So this is where we're seeing something like design thinking could have major transformational effects in terms of change management and how people work together and that kind of collaboration. And that's where I see maybe you know, the public service and sectors like that have a lower, potentially a lower level of maturity in terms of kind of creative thinking and design thinking, and it's happening in pockets, and maybe it's not streamlined in a way. And there are, I suppose, lots of different ways that people can approach more creative practices in organizations that have a lower level of that kind of maturity. It involves teamwork though, so that is really important to have allies, and ideally it will involve an advocate at a kind of a higher level as well. That's not to say at lower levels, it's pockets of activity that gain kind of traction and gain interest. And as soon as you start to do things that become popular, and you will become popular when you start to apply some of the techniques and methods, it does start to gain traction. You will kind of maybe hopefully start kind of gathering interest from higher levels, and you can gradually impact teams and structures and slowly kind of change how things are done. So that's where I see a huge kind of potential there, you know. Now it can be difficult, you know, changing cultures is difficult, but it can be used, these kind of techniques can be used to do that.
Yeah, great. I remember the first time I heard the concept like stealth innovation or stealth creativity, and almost like not trying to bring in a whole new process and change management procedure around something like design thinking, but maybe just having a little sneaky pilot, a couple of people see the results, and then it's like, oh, just so you know, what we were doing there was this process or that process. And
I mean, it sounds really, I don't know, like it sounds really stupid, but people call meetings workshops all the time now, but that is one small area that an individual can apply more creative thinking practices and tools, how they structure a meeting. And just like John was talking about, these meetings without agendas, without kind of goals, without focusing on a problem. And, you know, a meeting is a great place to start for an individual maybe who wants to apply these techniques in the workplace. And there's maybe a lower level of maturity there, you know.
Great. Thanks a million, Niamh. Jonathan, any bills on that? I know you're passionate about about meetings and clarity.
Well, I mean, one thing everyone can quickly look up is IdeoArt, which is Hyper Island's way of structuring every meeting: intention, design, objectives, agenda, rules, roles, and timing. And they would argue, if you haven't done that at the beginning of any meeting, or the person running the meeting doesn't tell you, walk out of the meeting. If someone can't be sorry, I'm not allowed to say that, am I? But if someone can't be bothered to set up their meeting properly, why should you go and give your time to it? The final bit, if I've got time to say this, I've just sort of been scribbling notes, and I think John said something which I loved, was this idea of structured methodologies. And then, you know, Niamh said in part of her last bit, you know, the importance of teamwork. And one of my mentors is a Canadian academic called Dr. Min Bassador. And he's always said there's an equation for sort of innovation in an organization. And he has 4 lines. And the first line is, who is on the team? You know, and he takes team not just as your, you know, the exact team, it might be your stakeholders. So I suppose, using John's example, he probably, I presume, John, you work with designers, etc., who make it, but who else within the bank do you go to for insights? Where do you go for, you know, for all of that? So have you got the right people on your team? Do you follow a structured? Min has always argued that you need to follow a structure, some form of methodology that takes you through the process of problem solving or innovation, whatever term you want to use. The third step is that within that process, you will need to be cognizant of various tools and techniques to get the most out of the process. So that a very simple one is, what techniques do you use to generate ideas? Post-it note brainstorming. Do you use cards? What do you do to help free up those ideas? And all of those can be gained. And the fourth step in his equation goes back to what I was saying earlier, is an understanding of everybody's cognitive diversity, their approach. So the right people on the team following a methodology that everybody understands and knows where they are, with the skills and tools to get the most out of that methodology, and an understanding of the way people on that team like to approach problem solving. Boom, that gets you get all of those right, and you are more likely to be creative and innovative, is what he has always argued. So
Great.
Again, I offer all the people here, think about that in terms of your organization. Can you audit, are the right people on the team? Do we have a methodology? Are we skilled? Do we appreciate how we like to solve problems?
People, process, skills.
I love all this stuff. Yeah.
It comes across just a little bit.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thanks. No, all good. Thanks, Jonathan. I'm trying to keep up with chat, but failing. Anna, thanks for the book recommendation about how to bring creativity into the world of education. And Alan, I have seen your question. I will get to it. But I'll just thank the panel members for all of their thoughts so far. We're going to transition a little bit now, and I'm going to do a little promo for the related program that we're running next May, and then after that we will have time for questions, and we will definitely be finishing before 2 o'clock. So let me just share my screen quickly, and I will mention a program that we have, which is entitled Design Thinking for Strategic Innovation. And this program, as you will see from the course content down the bottom, will cover a lot of the topics that we discussed today in more detail. It runs over the course of 5 weeks, and it's a 4-hour sessions each week, happening in May every Thursday, starting on May 4th, as you can see there. There is a certificate of completion issued from Tangent and Trinity College Dublin following the delivery, which is online. And in terms of the course content, then we spoke a lot about creative thinking here in this panel discussion. So that's the topic for session 1. And then we kind of go a little bit more into the process side of things, and we introduce the creative problem solving process, followed by design thinking as a process, and then go into detail a bit more on tools and techniques that can inspire and open up creativity through rapid idea generation. And then finally, we try to wrap it all together in terms of how we might implement some of those processes in our organizations for positive change management. The fees for the course are $750 for the early bird, which is currently still open, and it will be until the end of the month. And then the full price is $950. From here, next steps for people that are interested, there is a few things that you can do. The first thing you can do is come to our taster session next week on the 26th. It's happening at 1 to 2. I will pop a link for that registration for that into chat in a second. That will be run by Jonathan Bannister, who you've met today. And that'll be a really nice introduction into the content of the program. You could also visit our website, email us at tangentcourses@tcd.ie, or book time with me direct to discuss more. So I'll stop sharing and I'll pop into chat links for the taster and for those various other things. And then we will open it up for questions. So let me just, so anyone who has a question brewing, feel free to unmute and ask verbally, or you can pop it into chat. And I will be popping those links into chat right now, and I will share them out after the session as well. So there we go, all the links are in the session. So
shall I jump in with my little one?
Of course, yes.
Hi, I'm Alan at UCD actually. And But yeah, the perception of this sort of design approach or creative approach being a intensive workshop that runs for a few days, they do this. We do the same sort of thing here in different parts of the college. But I think, does that undersell it or oversell it? I mean, there's a kind of slow innovation that I think you're aiming to achieve here, and I'm just interested in examples where that's taken root.
Anyone on the panel want to jump in on that? Thanks, Alan.
Sorry, just to clarify, so you're talking about the idea of like not just doing it in a short burst, say the 5-day sprint, actually doing it over much more longer and sustained period of time. Over
Yeah, exactly. Actually, John, you're probably working in a place like that. But so, outside in, can you give us a picture of what it's like to be working in that? Yeah,
I think it works when it's a part of sustained change program for an organization, particularly. So we've 2 or 3 years ago during COVID, there was a change program going on already, which allowed us to kind of, when the demands of COVID and the quick responses were required, we already had teams set up to be able to take on board. If you remember, there was a lot of obviously people being furloughed and needing to kind of quickly innovate and quickly get some changes made to processes which would have been very paper-based, but obviously there was no branch access, so we had to leverage that change program. So I think there's merits in both. I think the idea of doing a quick 5-day sprint is great because it quickly gets something into the hands. The longevity of that and the sticking power of that reduces probably the week after, right? And the week after gets forgotten about. Whereas when you're continuously going at bringing workshops, and it's a longer term piece, it kind of allows a lot more momentum to be built up. And I think in organizations, you're looking to do that. You want your quick wins, and you talk about Kotter's 8-step change model, right? You need to bring people along in that process as well, right? So actually, and that will sustain and probably persist for years to come. The others tend to just be a little bit more flares. So there, I think you take from that the longer change programs and the longer impact, and while it's a marathon kind of activity, it persists and it's still with us, and it's changed the organization and arguably more powerful in the longer term.
I think it can depend on the scale of the organization as well. Possibly, like I worked in a small to medium software company on the west coast of Ireland, and effectively kind of creative thinking techniques were introduced to the company via a design sprint. So, you know, the organization were looking to disrupt in an area. They wanted to develop a new product, these kind of techniques were never used in the company before. And because there was a CEO who was open to trying new things, we managed to get in a 2-day design sprint to kickstart ideation on the new product. We got the head of marketing, the head of engineering, design team, CEO, another couple of the sales team were there, and customer care for 2 days. Managed to get everyone to agree on what problem that we'd focus on first, got it prototyped, and okay, after 5 days, we tested it, we did user testing. That was the first time that user testing had ever been conducted in the organization, okay? So even though, the effects maybe of the design sprint, actually what we prototyped was not as successful in the user testing. So that's a success story in the failure. But it created an impetus in the organization to adopt that way of approaching things. And we cherry picked then bits of that process to kickstart new features, and we retained obviously then the user testing. So it had a transformative effect on the smaller organization, and it changed the way people started to think about about new product development, for sure. So there was benefits in that example anyway, from that shorter kind of design sprint, and how it had a lasting impact on the culture itself. Now that's a small organization, and it's a small organization who had a low level of maturity, but it certainly did have an impact, you know.
Nice, very nice example, Niamh, of maybe something that the output necessarily didn't go anywhere, but like the kind of cultural shift and the new things that were introduced made a difference down the line. I'm just watching the time, and we're coming up to 2, so I don't even want to get near 2 because people might have meetings coming up. But I'm just going to finish by saying thanks very much to the panel members. So thanks, John, thanks, Niamh, thanks, Jonathan. Thank you to everyone else who's attended. It's a sunny day outside. You could have gone and sat in your garden, but you came and listened to us, so thank you for that. I have popped in those links into chat again, so please feel free to attend our taster next week, or to contact me if you want more information about the program in May. Thanks very much, everyone. We'll talk to you all soon. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Namaste, Jonathan. If anyone still on the line has any questions about the program, feel free to ask me. That's grand.
Shay, hi. Sorry, I have to go quickly. Sorry, I just put a question in there very late. I can't